smash the like button and subscribe. Then why shouldn't the president be able to determine death penalty, right, under due process himself? But it is the case that he can determine other sort of punishments by due process.
Because as I said, the amount of due process for each case, each circumstance should be different.
I understand, but like I just addressed that. Like you have to tell me why. Like what specifically? Like what gives him authority to determine due process himself? Right, in some instances, but not in others.
I don't believe he's determining due process himself even currently. He's determining
wait, you just said that through JD Vance's quote that they should have authority to determine due process.
But as the executive branch, I think yes, they can. Like as a whole entity, his
government. Okay, so if the executive branch determines that I'm guilty of treason, should they be able to sentence me to death?
But I believe that.
No, I'm just asking because I'm asking genuinely if the Trump administration, right, says that I've committed treason because I go on lives and I do anti-Trump lives, right, and I'm a traitor to this country, would they be justified and through due process saying without the context of the courts that I deserve the death penalty?
No, definitely
Why not? Why not?
You have a right to free speech protected.
But why not? Or free speech, isn't that established by the Constitution and by the court? I thought you said he could go against the Constitution and the courts, and that the executive branch should have that authority. Ari, thank you for the reses. What's up?
Pam Bondi, her team, the Attorney General, she and the legal judicial branch of the United States government, including the Attorney General, can determine due process. Because I have a question to give you. If the same amount of due process given to somebody facing like unaliving people, right, is given to every illegal immigrant in the U.S., it would be impossible to get them all out.
Oh, okay. Maybe then you should just do mass amnesty because it's impossible to do mass deportation, right? But in a justified way, because you're saying that because you can't actually do mass deportation in a manner that goes through due process, we must violate the Constitution of the United States of America, right, and go against what the Supreme Court explicitly says is the law of the land, and their order that people should be given due process.
I believe that the length of due process should be shorter for illegal immigrants. They deserve less due process.
What?
And they do deserve.
Why? Wait. Why do they deserve less? What do you mean by less due process? Are you saying that undocumented? Wait. Then I'll ask you this question: should Donald Trump be able to determine that an undocumented immigrant has committed treason through due process himself?
Have they committed treason?
Yeah. Can he determine that they've committed treason?
They committed a crime by entering the country.
Could the Trump administration be like, these specific undocumented immigrants have committed treason, therefore we get to execute them? Do you think that he should be able to do that?
The level of due process to prove that they committed treason is different, and the extent.
So then what's the level of due process to determine? So you're saying the level of due process required to determine that they're an undocumented immigrant, right, is a lot lower, and that the president should be able to determine that.
Not the president, but
not the president. The attorney general should be able, just based upon their own whim,
and courts as well, and the DEA. I mean, not the DEA.
So essentially, you're saying that like they should be able to, based upon, just an accusation, right, kick people out of the country.
Accusation.
Yeah, without due process. Like you could be literally deporting U.S. citizens without knowing, which it would be bad, right?
Very bad. But I'm not saying we don't give them due process. They should be given due process.
Okay. You're saying they should be given due process. They weren't given due process, and Donald Trump and JD Vance were arguing that they didn't need due process, and then you quoted them.
I quoted JD Vance, who said that they do deserve due process. That was in his interview with CNN or Fox News, not sure which one, and he said that the level of due process is where the Supreme Court and the White House are having issues.
Yeah. Okay. So what does he mean by the level of due process? Does he mean that the Trump administration can just determine whether or not someone's undocumented themselves? Like they don't have to go through the court system? Is that his notion of it? Because to me, that's not due process. Due process goes through the court system.
Look for whether they're undocumented or not. There
Mhm.
there are ways to look and search.
Say it again.
Homeland Security can determine whether they're undocumented or not, and they can enforce deportations.
Okay. So not the court system.
Yes, the court system as well,
Yeah,
alongside.
so yes, the court system. So the court system does it. Okay. So then if the court system does it, then you believe that like
Courts
Abrego
that-
Garcia didn't get specifically the due process or being deported.
Everybody deserves due process.
Okay, well there you go. That was the point that I
Document-
was demonstrating. Everyone deserves due process.
I feel like I've stated that. Like,
Yeah,
I
but
haven't-
what you're trying to do is muddy the water of what due process is in the first place. You're trying to say that they were given due process if it is the case that just the Trump administration determines that they shouldn't be in the country.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the extent of due process. And when you have the case of the judge who's harboring and like letting undocumented immigrants leave through the back door, she is assisting and helping undocumented immigrants stay in the country.
Yeah, I think that undocumented immigrants who have not committed violent crimes or bad crimes should be allowed to stay in the country. There's nothing wrong with that if it is the case that like we're referencing people who have not committed violent crimes or bad crimes. Why do you want to deport people when you've acknowledged that you would have to violate the level of due process that exists now?
I believe they should come through legal means. This is I don't know if I'm stretching here, but the reason why Trump gained the Hispanic vote is because he was being stricter on immigration
Okay.
compared to
Can I ask you a
because-
question?
yeah.
Do you think that undocumented immigrants that have been brought here by their parents when they were kids should be deported? Say they're adults now, should they be deported?
So like they were what babies, new like
That they were brought to this country when they were a baby, they're still undocumented, they're an adult now. Should they be deported?
no, because they've already assimilated.
What do you mean by assimilated?
They-
So I have a question. So if an undocumented immigrant comes to the country and quote unquote assimilates, then you think that they should be given a pathway to citizenship? What is assimilation?
I feel like somebody, our government needs to decide and needs to give a pathway to citizenship, but the amount of illegal immigrants and undocumented immigrants is too much. There are a lot of kids missing, a lot of that aren't.
Okay, maybe you would reduce the likelihood of there being kids missing if it is the case that you had a legal process and you allowed for more people to come into the country. You say there's too many people. No, there's not. I'll ask you this question. Would you be okay with 1 to 3% population growth per year?
Probably less than 2.
Less than 2%. Okay, so let's say you have it at 1%. What is 1% of 360 million?
1% of 360 million. Is it 36 million?
Yeah, so you're okay with 36 million people coming to the country a year? That's way more than are in the country than undocumented immigrants currently in the country right now. You're okay with more people coming to the country, right, per year than there are undocumented immigrants in the country right now. Okay? And now you're telling me that there's too many people where we can't give them mass amnesty? I think that's a lot.
You believe we can give blanket amnesty
Hey,
or just
chat. I'm running with the 36 million number, please. Okay, go ahead.
sorry, it's 3.6. Okay, that's my bad. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Chat, come on, you gotta let me run with it.
Sorry.
Dude, Jesus.
Yeah, that's my bad. Biden's Treasury Secretary, Shannon.
Okay,
yeah,
but you get my point, right? Like, if we were to reference the entirety of the Biden-Harris administration, 3.6 million a year, that's more people than came to the country. You're okay with it?
we're not considering immigration and also birth.
You're not considering. Oh, wait. So you want to? Okay. Well, you understand that our population will end up decreasing, right, because of the level of birth rate, right? Because our birth rate is below replacement rate, and it's been that way for like the past 50 years.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so our population in the long run will end up reducing because it is the case that we have a birth rate that's below replacement rate. Like replacement rate being I think it's like 2.1.
I believe it should be easier for people from other countries to come here legally. I do believe that completely. I believe yes, legal immigration is a good thing. I'm very pro immigration in that way, in legal immigration.
I understand, but I'm saying that if you think that there should be a pathway to citizenship for some undocumented immigrants so long as they assimilate, I'm asking you to clarify what you think assimilation is.
Assimilation is working a good job, not being underpaid, not being abused, not being documented in
What?
some like being a good not a citizen but close to a citizen. Do you understand? No. Okay.
No, no, no. What? Not what? What is assimilation? Like, what do you have to do in order to be considered quote unquote assimilated enough in order to be able to get a pathway to citizenship under your view?
Is what I said before not good? Did you not understand?
No, no, it was not clear. Just tell me like what specific.
Not what specifically. It's like proficiency in English. This is what I just Googled. I just Googled it.
So you think there has to be a quote unquote proficiency in English? What do you have to know in the context of English that means you should not be allowed into the country?
And also like contributing to society.
Contributing. So I have a question. You wouldn't let disabled people come to the country?
Legally, I'm all for it because disabled people, they can contribute to society, and they're no different.
I'm giving an example of someone who's specifically disabled who cannot, right? At a specific moment. Are you saying given that they can't at that specific moment, right? Is the case that like they shouldn't be allowed into the country?
I believe most people can contribute in a good way to any country.
Sure. I'm not disputing that. I'm asking you in this context, should they be allowed into the country? Like, what do you mean by contribute?
Society somebody who cannot contribute to society. That is this disabled person.
How about this? If you consider most people contributing to society, are you saying most undocumented immigrants you'd allow in the country because they've quote unquote assimilated?
First of all, the 3-point number, the 3-point something number that Biden let through, I believe like
most. Do you agree most undocumented immigrants work?
Okay, what I don't like is that this number, it's being skewed so much. We're very unsure on the actual level how many undocumented illegal.
I just want to clarify. Do you agree that most undocumented immigrants?
They mostly work. Yes, they do.
Okay. So, do you think most undocumented immigrants have quote unquote assimilated enough to be allowed into the country, given that they can contribute?
To the extent, with the amount of undocumented immigrants, it's very hard for me to say something like to make a clear opinion on this because I don't know them, personally. And I believe most do have a job. I also believe that most are underpaid, and I also believe
if you want to get rid of that abuse and exploitation, give undocumented immigrants who have been in this country, right, a pathway to citizenship. So if you have not committed a violent crime or a bad crime, you should be allowed to stay in the country.
Or how about we send them back, and by sending them to, but wait, give me a second. By sending them back, right, we let them enter the country legally in a method.
But the process takes 5 to 7 years on average. So if they've already gone through the process undocumented, given that that's the legal process, why would they just like choose to go through the legal process that way? Or why would they you wouldn't even find them in the first place? They'd have no incentive, right, to actually go through that process. Under my system, right, where you specifically are we're talking about in this country, right, people would be able to stay in the country, so they would clearly have an incentive to go through the pathway to citizenship, meaning that they would be treated significantly better as they would be given citizenship, right? So they would clearly go and do that, right?
But we can't do a blanket amnesty to
why not? To undocumented immigrants that have not committed violent crimes or bad crimes?
How would you know they've never committed a crime?
You have them go through a process that you will tell them goes quickly, and it will go quickly. It has to go quickly. And then as people see that the process legitimately works and people get their citizenship, people will go through the process, and very quickly, right? People will go through it.
Do you believe illegal immigration is a crime? Do you believe it's a crime?
It's currently designated as a crime. Sure.
Do you think it should be designated as a crime?
If you haven't committed a violent crime or a bad crime under the current law, no, it should not be considered as a crime.
It shouldn't.
But let me give you an example. Do I think that there should be certain border restrictions given that my laws have been implemented? Yeah, because I do think that there would be a justified law, and I think it would be unjustified to break a justified law. Does that make sense? But if there's an unjustified law, then it would be like totally justified to break that. Some people say it's actually civil, when it comes to the border, I'm actually not quite sure in terms of coming to the country undocumented. I'm pretty sure there are some circumstances where it's civil and some circumstances where it's criminal.